am Colby, your host for this discussion. Today we are joined by an actor and director whose work has spanned 3 decades, and work on camera includes The Astronaut Wives Club, Marvel's The Falcon and Winter Soldier, Preacher, The Purge, and most recently, the television adaptation of Twisted Metal. He is the director of the upcoming LGBTQ film, This Is Jan. Also joining us is an actress, artist, and longtime friend of this director whose personal transition became the inspiration for the upcoming short film we are here to discuss today. Please welcome to the Academy, Robert Larriviere and Brooklyn Campagne.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yay.
Be here. This is awesome.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Of course. I want to start with a quote from the Santa Barbara International Screenplay Awards. The screenplay, This Is Jan, stands out with its concept and originality, particularly in its exploration of gender identity within a historical context that is not typically associated with such narratives. Your screenplay, along with your co-writers Hunter Burke and Nick Levin, has won Best LGBTQIA Short Screenplay at the New York Screenwriting Awards, Best Short Script at the Santa Barbara Indie Film Festival, Best Short Script at Sedona International Film Festival, a finalist of Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and official selections at LGBTQ Toronto Film Festival, Berlin International Screenwriting Festival, and Pitch Now. Congratulations.
What?
Robert, in your own words, who is Jan?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think Jan is an amalgamation of a lot of different people. To me, like you said, inspired by Brooklyn's transition, but ultimately, she is a representation of what gender exploration would have been like in the mid-century of the 20th century. A world that I didn't never explored and never really knew existed until we took on writing this story.
That's beautiful. Well, as they say in our film industry, show don't tell, I would like to show everybody the teaser for This Is Jan.
We didn't need that. We had faces. There just aren't any faces like that anymore.
It's beautiful. And I know that is just a teaser of what is to come, but fantastic job. The cinematography is really captures, I think, the essence of what the film itself will be, particularly the time period. The setting, the furniture, everything really speaks to the atmosphere that this script is. I want to go back. I want to dive into the origins of this story where you and Brooklyn began.
Yeah, and please, Brooklyn, join me on this journey because you've been there the whole time. Brooklyn and I met in college. We studied theater at Northwestern State University of Louisiana, and Brooklyn was at the university for 1 year, but I tell everyone all the time, it seems like she was there the entire time. It blows my mind that we only were together for a year, because she has always been a part of my life ever since. So, Brooklyn, if you don't mind my saying, the Brooklyn transitioned how many years ago? Brooklyn?
Transitioned, let's see, it's been about 12 years. So I transitioned very late. I transitioned at 42. And I mean, never too late, right? But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a journey and something I would do again in a heartbeat.
And for me, knowing Brooklyn for my entire adult life at that point, and I guess 22 years later, nothing seemed more right than finding out that she was transitioning. And I think it led me down a creative path of wondering, I'm starting to wonder what life would have been like for Brooklyn or anyone who transitioned in a different time period. I love the mid-century. So I kind of placed a character in that time period and started to wonder what that story would have been like. And that's kind of the origins of the story and the film we have today.
What's so funny is when I decided to transition, this was just prior to like Caitlyn Jenner transitioning, and the trans movement had not really hit yet. Like it was just before. And even at that point, it was difficult. The resources were not there. Would search the internet looking for things, and there would be these sort of collective lists that you could find of resources that other trans people had put together and whatnot. But everything just felt so far away and so hard to find. And that was not that long ago. So to think back on what somebody in the 50s had at their disposal was almost nothing. The research and all the stuff on hormones and everything was so new and underdeveloped at that point. And then who would you have found to do these things? So it is a very interesting thing to see from my own experience, and then look through Jan's eyes and imagine how much harder it would have been. And I mean, we've come a long way. We have a long way to go, but we have come so far from just several decades ago.
And I think the first connection in that journey of discovery is finding community, which is ultimately where the film leads to, is Jan finding a group of like-minded people, which is not something the story originally exposed, or I even could touch base on until I wrote the script, and Brooklyn was the first one to read it and challenged some of the concepts in a very loving way. And it led me down a journey of research, which brought me to a really wonderful place called Casa Susana, which existed in the 50s and 60s in the Catskills of New York. And it was a place for cross-dressers at that time period. I think the word we would have used was cross-dressers would have gathered from around the world. A lot of these people went on to transition later as they were exposed to more options. But, people from around the world gathered at this place and somehow managed to find each other, which is really wonderful. So to speak to what Brooklyn was saying about the internet, the idea that you have this wonderful space where you can gather and we can talk right now is really incredible. I don't know how many people are here right now, but in that time period, maybe 30 or 40 people would gather for the weekend. There's a documentary that came out last year. Someone traveled as far as from Australia to find this place. So I just wonder so much, how did they find each other? What was that networking like to find community in that time period?
And for our audience who might be unfamiliar with the Catskills in the kind of mid-century, the 50s, 60s, it's in New York. It's a resort area that was incredibly popular at the time. For those of you who might have seen The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, it was frequently portrayed in some of the seasons where you see some of kind of that resort community. But for something to exist, for people to be able to, a resort that was there for people just to explore gender identity and their expression of themselves was decades and decades ahead of what so many places in the rest of the world are doing. It was creating this community that, today we have technology to create forums and, these virtual spaces where all of us can come together, where we have, now thousands of people that are able to be resources and support to one another. But back in that time, that was essentially non-existent. There was a bit happening in the 1900s in Germany, which a lot of that research was destroyed, and in the United States, it was heavily outlawed. There weren't the same freedoms that we're still fighting for today. But
Well,
pre-Stonewall
gosh,
riots, like it was a very different world.
yeah. I mean, even before the internet, as a trans person, a young person struggling with gender identity, I mean, growing up, because I was born in 1970. So I had the 70s, 80s, and it really wasn't until the 90s, I think, that the internet happened and people had computers in their homes and people were starting to find each other. You only knew what crossed your path. You only knew the examples that you saw, and not having examples of other people like you is very isolating and very alienating. And tell my husband all the time, it's so wonderful to know that younger people exploring gender identity, who feel that they are trans, can find a community so easily, even if they're in small towns where there aren't a lot of other people like them. So it really brings people together and allows people to find themselves so much earlier and find resources to help them so much earlier.
Mhm. The digital age has definitely brought a lot of people together in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
Uh, to jump back into the script, there's a moment that really jumped out to me. It's when Jan calls the bellhop for champagne, and the bellhop replies, "Yes, ma'am," and her face lights up. Like those two words meant the world to Jan, and that really comes through the writing. I think for LGBTQ people, and very, very profoundly for most trans people, it's as though there are three rebirths. Kind of that awakening, that moment of self-realization where you start to understand who you are. And then later there's that moment when you look in the mirror where you are able to see yourself for the first time. And lastly, there's that first time that the world finally sees you. And that's something that is so amazing about these communities is because we're able to create spaces where people are seen as who they are. And I think that the script does a really wonderful job, and I really enjoyed how you painted a picture of those moments.
Well, thank you, and I'm so glad you got to experience the script on that level and see those moments. I think Jan for the first time exposes herself to the bellhop through her voice, so nobody sees her, and even um, and I'm sorry if this is hard for anyone who hasn't. I know everyone hasn't read the script, but most of the script is Jan exploring herself. I feel like I'm a gay cis male. The first thing I had to do was come out to myself, and I think that is a good portion of the script is Jan exploring herself and ultimately confronting herself and accepting who she is. So that is really wonderful that you saw that, Colby. the first time she exposes herself to someone else is through her voice, which she works with trying to mimic someone on the TV and trying to find a place where she feels natural, and she works up the courage to first make a phone call, and she's accepted in that moment. And that gives her a lot of courage to push through the rest of the story.
So for our audience here have not read the script, this is Jan takes place inside of a hotel, predominantly inside of an executive suite. And now this takes place in New Orleans, correct?
Yes.
Which I believe is where you both live. I had lived there for quite a long time, and obviously it's a beautiful place. It's a lot of culture. What does New Orleans mean to you, and how do you connect to this script in terms of location?
That's a good question. I think originally I understand a little bit of the queer culture of New Orleans, so I knew that there was a vibrant scene here early on when I was writing the script, so it felt comfortable and natural since I live here. But ultimately, as I pushed on and learned more history, especially about trans culture that existed in that time period, it really could have been set anywhere. There are lots of great things happening all over the country. New Orleans, I think, allows some vibrancy and acceptance, a willing suspense of disbelief right off the bat that New Orleans is an open culture that this person could exist in.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it could be anywhere.
Yeah, and so the time period of this film is mid-century. Obviously, it's the 50s. Gender exploration of that time was new, and is there a reason that you chose specifically to write about that period?
I think technically it provides, and this goes back to our conversation before, it provides a lot of cover. Jan can leave on a business trip, leave his wife and son at home, and explore who she might be later on without having to worry about a FaceTime call or any outside sources. Once Jan gets into the hotel room, that world belongs to Jan, and there's really not a lot of outside influence. There's a phone call at one point, but you can really, I felt like it was a world where Jan could really leave everything behind and find some solitude to explore themselves.
Mm-hmm. And Brooklyn, I know we unfortunately don't have too much time with you here today, but the for the entertainment industry to see more representation like this, what is your experience with working in film or working just in acting, period, whether it's on stage or any medium? Where are you able to find and push for this representation that we seldom see but are beginning to see more of?
Actor and also did a little film. Most of my work was prior to my transition. Um, since I have transitioned, I have done some small stuff, some independent stuff. I've been getting auditions for some bigger things, which is great. The fact that they're considering me, you know, just as a trans person I identify as trans, but I consider myself a trans woman, a woman. And as an actor, I just want to be seen as a woman. It doesn't have to be specifically trans, or it doesn't have to be, I just want
Mm-hmm.
to be a trans person working. I want to be that person who can get the roles and do the work without it being about my transness. And I think that Hunter Schafer, who is from the show Euphoria, and I think has another film coming out, uh, is a younger trans woman. And she recently made some statements in an interview very much in line with how I feel about not always wanting it to be that conversation around her work. She just wants to be representation. She wants to be out there doing the work as a trans woman. And so that was very important to me when I signed with my new agent was I don't want to just be handed roles that are transgender people. I would like to be all things that are female identifying because I'm an actor. I would like the same chances that anybody else would have. So I feel like just getting out there and doing the work and showing up, being there, just gives us more opportunity to be seen. I love being able to watch things and see a trans person. My husband and I started watching Maya Rudolph's show Loot on Apple Plus, and uh, oh, what is her name? From Pose. She was one of the main actresses on Pose, playing a character on there, and she herself is a woman of trans experience, but she is not playing a trans character. She's just playing a woman, and I love that. I love that she's out there working, getting the parts, not just because they are a trans character.
Uh,
That's
was it India Moore potentially? Who was it?
Michaela Michaela.
Rodriguez.
She played Blanca. Yeah. In Pose.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Yeah, I had the different. I know that in Pose, India Moore has a different character that she plays, and she's brilliant. I had the fortune of meeting and working with her on Queen and Slim.
Yeah, she's lovely.
And she's just playing a woman in the film, which is, not. It's just a role created where we don't have to have these stereotypes in film. And I know in the 90s and early 2000s, just being able to book roles, just being a woman without having it be a trans character was really difficult and really hard to fight for those roles. And now with actresses and actors, people like India Moore and Hunter Schafer, we're really just starting to see casting look at people as just actors and actresses. And hopefully we'll see a lot more of that to come. It's definitely a difficult market, particularly when there's a lot of bigotry, and it has corporate backlash, as we saw recently with Bud Light. It's and the studios, unfortunately, a lot of things are very actuarial, and it can be hard to, whether it's casting a director or anything, to convince studios just to hire people if they're afraid that there could be backlash that affects their end dollar. And that's where it's important for producers and executives and directors to fight for to fight for the talent that they want to work with. And it's definitely not an easy industry to begin with. But for those looking to explore entertainment, do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
Just do it. Do it. Don't let anything stand in your way. Just do it. If you're passionate about it, do it. Keep showing up. Make yourself present. Don't hide. Don't give up. Just keep doing it because things are getting better. They're crawling, but they're getting there. And so just keep showing up. Keep exploring what you love. And, we all know the entertainment business is luck. It's like winning the lottery sometimes, being in the right place at the right time. But if you just keep showing up, your odds of achieving what you want to achieve are going to be greater.
You have to make your own luck.
Yes. Yes. Make your own luck. Just keep moving forward is what I tell anybody in anything. Just keep making steps forward. Don't give up.
If I could say, from my humble opinion, I think the more people show up, the more we normalize, right?
Yeah.
So
I think
I think
that's what I mean by like just keep showing up because the more we're there, the more they expect us to be there. And then we're just there. I think about because I grew up, when Robert and I were coming up, I mean, there was a period where gay people went through this, you know, in the 80s and 90s, where just getting gay representation on screen or on television, it was either the person, dying of AIDS, or they were these crazy stereotypes, or, you know, it wasn't normalized and just part of the conversation until much later. Now we're doing it all over again, but with the trans people. So I know it gets there. You just have to keep going.
Hmm. I know we don't have too much time with you, but I'd like to kind of talk a bit more about This Is Jan. For someone who has known Robert for a long time, when you first saw this script and um, the making of this process as it starts going into production, what does this story mean to you personally?
I personally love the fact that this character is where she is in her self exploration. We've seen examples in film of a trans person, right? We've seen somebody who's already sort of living in that space. We really haven't seen much of the sort of inner workings of a person trying to find themselves in that space where it's really you see the little joys like like being called ma'am on the phone, right? That is like a firework moment. Like it makes that person feel so alive. And then the struggle of having to just try to get up the courage to walk out the door as who they are. The struggle that she goes through, we haven't really watched that. And that's what I love about this script is it Robert and I have had this conversation. We're like, who is Jan? Is she a cross-dresser or what we now would probably call oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Um like more fluid, like just a fluid person who doesn't feel masculine or feminine. They just like to wear what they like to wear. The 50s, it was identified maybe more as a crossdresser or somebody who was trans, but we didn't have a word for that yet. Um, and I would say, who is Jan? And we were like, it's kind of almost left open ended where we're just watching this one part of her journey, which is her discovering herself, struggling with her identity. I just find it very honest and real. And it's something that anybody who struggles with themselves, whether they're gay, trans, non binary, whatever, probably goes through that at some point where you're trying to figure yourself out against what we have been taught or what the society norms are. And so to me, I just love the fact that we're getting to watch this very real thing that we just haven't really had a chance to see much of in film.
Hmm. For me, it just felt very authentic, with the
Yeah.
whirlwind of emotions happening in such a short period of time, from the joy and acceptance, um, to like the dysphoria, the struggle, the self-doubt, and it can all happen with just a snap of a fingers.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
you just catch one look in a mirror, one bad shadow, and it can immediately turn into a whole bunch of emotions that are difficult to cope with.
Oh,
And that's
yeah. I
something that a
still
lot of
get
people really
dressed.
can relate to.
Yeah, I still get dressed. I mean, I'm 14 years into my transition and I still have days where I'll put something on and I'll be like, something will trigger me and I'll still feel very dysphoric about my body, or I'll just something, it's it becomes less and less, but it's kind of always there, and you just learn how to manage it. But it's a very familiar thing, and I think that's what I do love about this is that it is very real. I think anybody could relate to it.
Hmm.
I agree with that.
Robert,
I think, yes, go ahead, Colby.
yeah, so what I was going to ask you is, how did you research this? How did you um, come up with this character that is able to accurately portray and authentically portray kind of the gender experience?
Um, Probably leaned into my own experience of coming out and the things I dealt with. I think there is something very universal about the story. I've had a lot of people read the script, and everyone connects with being there on some level. And I don't think who you are, it doesn't matter who you are. I think we've all had that experience of trying to find a way to accept ourselves in some way. And that experience of opening a door. We all have some sort of dysphoria, you know. We all have that glance in the mirror. But to say on some level, I've never experienced this in my life, but I really feel like Jan is my muse. And from the conception of her in my mind, she has led me on this journey, like literally held my hand and brought me to the places I needed to be. I have learned so much through her that I really hold her responsible. You know, even as far as like going back to Casa Susanna, leading me to that place. It's not a place I necessarily would have found without her. You know, and the experience of learning all these other pre-Stonewall things that I didn't know about, like the Cooper Donut riots or the Compton cafeteria riots. This whole world that exists before before Stonewall. All of it attests to her simply being a muse that brought me to the places I need to be.
I think that there are a lot of people that can relate to this, even if it's not their own personal experience. People are able to find their own struggle on the pages, and they'll be able to find their struggle on the screen. Regardless of whether they're from the LGBTQ community or not, there are a lot of films that portray struggle very well, and this is the writing of this definitely shows that. Other films that did a very good job of that recently was Into the Across the Spider-Verse, the Spider-Man animation by oh God, I'm blanking on the directors' names on that project, but that was just a brilliant film that just showed internal struggles and people struggling to be themselves, and you know, whether or not some of it was to be hinted at the LGBTQ community. I mean, there was a Protect Trans Kids flag, which was great to see, and such a widely popularized animation. But people are able to find films about struggles and find ways to relate to them. And when you can find a film that just people can find themselves in, or stories that people can find themselves in regardless of their life experience, that's always a beautiful thing. That's the point of why we make films, why we create, why we write, and so I'm very excited to see how this develops. Um,
You know, I really have to say it would be unfair for me not to acknowledge my writing partners and why this film is universal. Hunter Burke is a colleague of mine, an actor, and his writing partner, Nick Lavin. I had a story that I created, and Hunter believed in it so much. He is a straight male. He believed and loved the story so much. Nick, his writing partner, is a straight male as well. He's a psychiatrist. They gave me the bones that you see in the script now, and I think I have to acknowledge that there is a universal thread because part of the writing came through a straight cis male point of view. So they found some universality in it in creating the structure of this script that we have today.
I don't mean to. I don't mean to interrupt, Robert. I squeaked out every last second. I've got to scoot. I have a 4:30 appointment. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful and so unique. I've never done something like this, so this has been fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Brooklyn. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
you.
Enjoy the rest of the
Thank you.
conversation, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooklyn.
Hi, Robert.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Brooklyn.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Yippee.
So Robert, if we can dive in a bit more to the filmmaking process, I'd love to talk about your cinematic vision. Now we have a wonderful script, and I want to know what is the vision you have carrying it forward cinematically. How do you plan to tell this story through the eyes of a lens?
That's a great question. So when I was a kid, my aunt told me, I think it's a Japanese proverb I found out later in life, that she told me we're all three people. We're the person the world sees, we're the person we see ourselves as, and then there's who we truly are. And that concept lays out the three acts for me and how we see the film through the lens. When we meet Jan in the beginning, he is straight male. He's got a wife and a kid at home, and he's living the gender norms of the period, which is another thing the 50s gave us. They're very specific outlines of what gender is. And we almost look at it through a cinematic lens, that transatlantic accent that people used in movies in that period. But when we meet Jan, we're gonna see him through the way the world sees him, and we're gonna see him surrounded by society in a busy lobby. Everyone is gonna look exactly the same. All the men will be dressed the same color scheme. Everything will blend almost in a monochromatic way. When Jan enters the hotel room and she's allowed to start seeing herself as she wants to be, that sequence is almost a fantasy. So the lens will come closer to her. We're going to see more of the details of what's happening, and we're going to find a vibrance in this moment that we didn't see before, with a lot more saturated colors. Later on in the film, Jan has that moment where she realizes that everything she thought was happening wasn't real, and the fantasy is broken. And then we're going to discover a more natural lighting, a more natural. My cinematographer makes his bread and butter by shooting reality TV. So I really almost want to find a reality TV kind of cinematography there, where the camera feels real and alive and natural in the moment, and we experience real color. And that'll take us through the end of the film. And in that as well, I know you just had your voice class. That is something, my husband is a casting director and he's casting the film. We're about to have callbacks. One of the most important things to me is the voice. I think men in that time period, and it's not necessarily just the people you see on TV, found a really effective way to talk, to almost like a rooster, showing their colors through their voice. It was very specific. And then in the script, Jan starts to try and discover her feminine voice, and it is also affected on some level, trying to mimic the person she sees on the soap opera on TV. Then in the end of it all, male Jan and female Jan, these two personas hash out who they think they really are, which we see as the two of them having a discussion. It's really an internal monologue. So I want to find a purity in that voice, something very natural and almost childlike, where they hash out who they truly are. So between the lens and the actor finding those levels, of voice. I think those are that's the big picture for me in creating this film.
So one of the things that I found reading it, that's really interesting, as we break down scripts, whether you're a director or actor, um, anybody who works in the film industry, you have to read between the lines. And one of the things most prevalent about this script that you can read between the lines on is the way that pronouns are referred to when it comes to Jan. And they change throughout the story based on the way that they are being perceived by the world, the way that they are perceiving themselves, and the way that they're dealing with those struggles. And it's that both internal and external conflict that was really interesting to read between the lines, just as pronouns were used. And so, like, an audience doesn't get to see the way that they're used in a script, but for people involved in the production, it's they're cues that help create the visual story in our heads to something that doesn't exist. And that's something that I thought translated very well on page, and I'm looking forward to see how that translates on screen.
Thanks. I'm really glad you saw that. That was some really delicate work, and as it is in the world, right? So, and even whenever I talk now, I find myself falling into different pronouns for Jan, depending on what I'm talking about. Because again, I think in the time period, we didn't have that nomenclature. We didn't have that that at all. Like Jan probably just saw himself as him. But in today's world, he would have found a different viewpoint. And you're right, it is just on paper. Part of the process for me was to get the script out there into the world, and for the reader to visualize what was happening, those pronouns had to be right in the moment. So I'm glad you saw it.
Yeah, and it comes through, like, the characteristics, the way that the detail. So as the story develops, you talk about the saturation and the way that as Jan sees the world, those colors change, and the attention to detail becomes sharper, closer as they start to enjoy themselves and express and learn about themselves. So the details become heightened, and that becomes a visual cue for the audience to pay attention to, and that leans into, I think, the cinematography that you were discussing, where you change the contrast, the palettes as the story develops. And so that's something that's going to be very interesting. What are going to be the hardest parts about what is to come for you?
I think the journey, I will say, has been really easy. I have always had Brooklyn by my side to guide me, along with, like I said, Jan as a muse. I have a really wonderful team who are all so passionate about this and willing to give the world. I think at this point, the last big key is finding Jan. We have some wonderful actors here on the ground that we've auditioned, and we're going to have callback soon. It is surprisingly hard for me as an actor, harder than I thought it would be, to commit to this one thing, because it's everything. We don't have a lot of dialogue in this script, and we're going to visually hang our hat on one person telling the story, and their emotional journey is going to be everything. So that's the deepest part of things where we're at right now. We're a couple of months away. We're trying to lock it in so that actor has time to ruminate over this and be able to live it the way I want it to be seen. other than that, it's money. We're fundraising. We're trying to get all the money together. I want more than anything just to do this story justice. We have a lot of really wonderful things on our side, but we've got 150 backers who are supporting us now, who all believe in me and this story in Brooklyn. And a couple of weeks left to raise the money we want. But the things we have on our side beyond that are a really wonderful cinematographer. We work in the film industry here in New Orleans, so we have a lot of wonderful people who are supporting us by giving us lights and feeding us, all of those things. But it's a really fun and exciting journey ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Definitely important to be fed on set. I know that can, as crazy as it sounds, but it can make or break a production. Just the simple comforts that keep people going, that those 12, 16, 18-hour days.
Right. And you totally get that. I just realized, like, people may not understand that, but food is important. It's a long day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That one Rice Krispie that you weren't expecting when you needed it is what saves the whole scene. So what I would love to do is take some questions from the audience. We have obviously a lot of people here, and there are many people who might be aspiring artists, and whether they want to work on camera, whether they want to work behind the scenes, behind the camera, directing, producing, writing. I would love to be able to offer them an opportunity with you to be able to learn from you. So if we could, if anybody has any questions, I just realized I cannot hear the audience. Actually, yeah.
We can
Hello.
speak.
Okay.
We just want to be polite.
No. Oh, great. Lord, did you have a question?
No, but thank you for asking.
Okay.
There's someone over here. I have one.
Hello. If you have a question, just come on up to the stage because it's very hard for us to hear.
So, in your opinion, would you say that acting school is a worthy investment in modern time with like the costs of school and etc.?
Sure. Robert, is acting school in today's modern day worth the investment and the time?
That's a really good question, and yes, I think training's important, and I think what you want to look at schools, no matter what, and it may sound disingenuous or unfair, but look at the kind of connections you can make coming out of that school as well. Because that school, if they're allowed to connect you with agents or the community or whatever path you want to go on, will also provide a good education and give you the training you need. But ultimately, you should have a good path for that training once you get out of school. This is my point of view.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Oh.
We cannot hear you, Sen.
Hello? Am I heard now?
Yes, now you're transmitting.
Cool. I'm an aspiring screenwriter. As a director and I guess a writer yourself, if I remember correctly from what you were talking about, what do you look for in a good screenplay, and like what do you look for, or what do you think about when creating a good screenplay?
So Sen is an aspiring writer, and they were wondering what it is that you look for in as a director, as a writer, in a good screenplay.
I think, from my point of view, because my life is acting, I look for a good character who has a good story to tell. And I think that is where we find the universality that we were talking about before and why we do this. We want to connect with humanity. So I think ultimately for me, stories about authentic stories about life and humanity are what important to me. I mean, somebody else might say that they are looking for an action film and that's the world they want to live in, but I think that's more of a commercial prospect about making money. But I think in the indie world that I want to be in, I think it's about humanity and authenticity.
Thank you.
Maxie, you had a question?
Yeah, when is the movie gonna be released and where will it be released at? Like, what will it be available on the streaming service?
Yeah. So, when are you looking to release the film, and where will people be able to find it?
That's a great question. First, we have to make it, and then the process of for a short film. So this isn't short films don't necessarily get the release that the stuff in the mainstream media that we all see. So what we're going to do is we'll make
festivals.
And we're going to go into the festival circuit, which we're still trying to outline, right? We want to be strategic about where we go with it so that it's seen by as many people as possible. Ultimately, this is a proof of concept. My husband and I have always wanted to make queer films. So this is a proof of concept for us to be able to do other things in the future. Based on Jan, we wrote a treatment for a series, for example, about it's called My Oh My, and we extend this story into New Orleans in the 50s. There was a vibrant, wonderful queer scene in New Orleans, and one aspect of that was a club called My Oh My that existed from the 30s to the 70s, and it was a female impersonator bar. So obviously, in that bar, we would have had different walks of life and different experiences of gender exploration. So the characters we created all find a safe space in Club My Oh My, and then we go out to see what the world is like for them in the real world, in their home lives, in their work lives, in their love lives. So ultimately, you're going to see this film on the film circuit. Hopefully, we receive some notoriety, and maybe you'll find it on short programming like on PBS. Would be lovely to be nominated for an Oscar, for example, and it'd be part of that circuit. But ultimately, it would be a circuit.
Well, it's done quite well just as a screenplay on its own. So the accolades are definitely proceeding. Do we have any other questions?
If anyone wants to follow our journey, if you don't mind, Colby, our website is whoisjan.com.
Yeah, of course.
And you can go there, and we will always update our happenings there. Like next week, we're doing a queer tour to raise money for the film, where we'll explore queer New Orleans. There's an Indiegogo if anybody wanted to help us get this film made. And then Jan's Instagram is on there. She has her own Instagram where you could follow her story. So we could use, I hope that I'm starting to create my audience now, and that you will still be with us when we get this out into the film circuit, hopefully by the end of the year or early next year.
Fantastic. I think we had a few more questions out there.
Awesome.
Yes. Seeing that there's an uptick in video game movies as of late, if given a chance, what game, if any, would you make into a film?
Oh, I was born in 1972. The last game I played was Mario Brothers on like a Nintendo. I don't even know what it was, Nintendo 64 in like 1990. So I'm sorry to disappoint you there, but I can't help with this one. Maybe Mario Brothers, but aren't they making that into a movie now?
Yeah, they did.
It's already made.
Seems like every 5 years
It's already
an
made.
adaptation of it comes around.
Okay, just to support people like me, you know. Outside of that, and I have nothing. I'm so sorry.
Rosie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so one of the things that seems to be struggling with neo writers is the basically the empty page and just staring at it and wondering like what to write. Do you have a process that helps you face challenges within like finding not necessarily inspiration, but just ways to get you to get the ball rolling and get you to be able to focus on getting more on the page, or
Mm-hmm.
what like get through does?
Yeah. So what they were asking is when you're staring at a blank page, what is it that helps get the ball rolling? How do you find your inspiration? How do you get over writer's block?
Well, again, this is a unique question. I have a unique point of view. This is my first script. So I honestly wrote this entire story, and I'm a storyteller, right? I've been an actor my whole life, so I can talk like nobody's business. So I enlisted my friends to help me write it, Hunter and Nick. So basically, Hunter came to stay with me during COVID after he broke up, he had a breakup, and in visiting, I just told him this story because it had been in my head for a while, and he loved it, and he put it down on paper for me, and he created the structure of what we have today. And for me, I come back to the page when I'm inspired, in learning new things. I obviously ruminate about this story a lot. So when I have little breakthroughs, I come back to the page whenever I'm inspired. I know I just came back from the Sedona Film Festival where 3 of us writers won awards. And, everybody, talking to them, they all have different points of view. One of them literally schedules time and computer and does work for 3 hours a day, no matter what, no matter how they're feeling or creative. If their creativity's there, and they force to do it. The other person, like, if they don't feel creative, they clean the house or rearrange their furniture, and that breaks it for them. So I think for everyone it's different. But for me, I guess it started with a writer's block, and I had people to help me get through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just the writing process is really different for everybody, and there's kind of no one way. You have to find what works for you. Some people find that inspiration, like you said, by doing research, by finding something that inspires them, and as the pages write themselves, you sit down and you fill them out. So I hopefully that answers at least some of the question. It's all art is what you make of it.
Thank you.
Agree.
Any chance of having a screening of the film here once we're just within the virtual space, like a virtual film festival?
Love that. And I would love that for you if you had a virtual film festival, and I would be honored to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think we would definitely be more than capable, at the very least, of showing the film here. This is definitely a space where you're able to find your audience.
Yeah, that'd be. Do y'all have a space like that here in the Trans Academy where you can show films, or have shown films, or would?
So I mean, what we're standing in right now, of course, is the auditorium, and we have a world building team here where we're essentially able to create whatever we want to exist. And they're currently working on building new classrooms, building new stages. There's a lot of amazing work that goes on behind the scenes. And the recommendation could probably do a film screening in the Moonlight World, which is where we do a lot of late night DJ events. And they're just kind of a very relaxing space with just a large center screen. So that's a great recommendation for Moonlit. But yeah, we would love to host a screening when it is complete.
I would really love to show the film here. That would be absolutely amazing.
I think we can take one more question if anybody has one.
I have one.
Yes, over here.
I was really curious when they mentioned, it's like a two-in-one question. I was really curious when they mentioned the Compton cafeteria riot. I've never heard of that until now. I'm kind of curious where and how did they learn about LGBTQIA history?
Oh, yeah. So they had never heard of the Compton cafeteria riot, which I
Yeah.
believe was the what's the name of the place? The something donuts.
That's two different events. The
Oh, really?
Compton,
Okay.
yeah, the Compton cafeteria riot actually predates the Cooper Donut riot. So basically, I'm sorry, Cooper Donut was first. So like in I think the late 50s, like maybe as late as 1959, it was just like a place where drag queens, cross dressers would hang out late at night, and they were often harassed by the police. And it escalated into a riot. And I'm not talking about a riot like Stonewall. I think it was just like they fought back. It's probably the first instance of people fighting back. There's some debate to this story. I found out much later. I choose to believe because I want to believe that people were fighting for themselves. But it didn't gain a lot of traction. I don't think we're really in that element of stories starting to spread. I think and then I'm just trying to look for a date. Yeah, it was in the 66 was the Compton cafeteria riot, and that took place in San Francisco. And it's the same story. It's the same story as Stonewall too. These were all transgender drag queens who were fighting back against police oppression. It's just that Stonewall was the first one to gain the national attention. So if anyone was interested in finding more about it, Compton donut riots were in 59, and then I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The Cooper donut riots were in 59, and the Compton cafeteria riot took place in 66. In Los Angeles and San Francisco, respectively.
Oh, okay. Wow. So that's I've definitely got my homework cut out for me to learn about these things.
Yeah, but you're not going to, these are, we know about them, but they didn't get the attention or the press. So we don't have like the media to back it up. But these are things that happen in the world that we should all know about for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today. Thank you for coming to speak with us. I look forward to seeing how things go. But for those of us here, those of us who find the stream or watch it later, and when we put it online, where can people find you?
Our website is whoisjan.com, and that has all of our information. It has my personal Instagram, my contact information. It has Jan's Instagram, our Indiegogo campaign. If anybody wanted to support us, I would absolutely appreciate it. It's not something I'm used to doing, asking for help, but we could use all the help we can get. And again, that's whoisjan.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us here at the Trans Academy. This is
Colby,
a wonderful way.
I want to thank you for having me, but I want to thank you for such a lovely conversation. Thanks for reading the script and obviously caring a lot about it. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate your time, everyone who's here today.
Of course, it's truly our pleasure to be able to have you, to be able to bring people who can bring their experience, professional and personal, to our world here. These voices are important, and one of our goals here is to be able to spread voices for people to be heard and to foster communities where people can learn and explore themselves. They can find their capabilities, and to be able to share their own story. And these are the inspirations that are so important to us. So thank you very much for joining us. Robert, it has been our pleasure, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. Have a good day, everyone. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Robert.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate both of you.
Good luck.
Thank you.